Corey Quinn from CoreyQuinn.com is in the house. Corey's got an amazing story. He's the author
Mm.
of Anyone, Not Everyone, an amazing book, especially if you're running a digital marketing agency. The insights are phenomenal. There's a full-on audio version of it, which is how I prefer to learn. And what a great learning. What I think if I have to put down three books that I learned, Corey's book's going to be on the list for 2024. Corey,
Beautiful.
welcome to the show. How are you today?
So I'm great, man. I'm super excited to be here. I love sporting my new Yeti, which you guys lovingly sent me, which actually has the cover, the title of my book on it, as well as your beautiful logo. Thank you so much for sending that. It was unexpected and a really great gift. And now it's on my desk always because I love it.
I love
I'm
it.
excited to be here. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
That was the whole point of I think a common friend, Josh Nelson, is where he coaches us as well. And one of the things that he teaches is about gift giving inside your
Yeah.
businesses. It's got to be something that people are willing to use on a daily basis. It keeps you front and center. So that's just the idea from there. But tell me a little bit about Corey. Like, how did you get into the
Yep.
maybe the genesis story of who Corey Quinn is,
Sure.
a little bit of how you
Sure.
started out, and then you had a really
Yeah.
illustrious career growing Scorpion from 20 million to
That's right.
150 million, and
Yeah.
now what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. My story starts off when I was a 7-year-old kid in Los Angeles. I was recruited to go be on commercials. So because you're in Los Angeles, of course I had to grow up as a childhood star. I was in the world's first ever recorded Chicken McNuggets commercial.
No
I
way.
proceeded to do, yes, I was in that very first commercial. I did a bunch of McDonald's commercials. I did an Igloo Ice Chest commercial with Joe Theismann, an NFL quarterback, very famous guy. And so I got my start in advertising really early. I wrapped up my childhood acting experience in a couple years, went back to normal life. But eventually, after being an entrepreneur, I found myself in the agency space. I started as a salesperson, being a what they call a business development rep for an
Hmm.
enterprise level PPC and SEO agency. We were selling, and I personally sold deals to Lululemon, Remax, Hyundai, the Men's Warehouse. And these are big 5, 6 figure PPC and SEO deals. And I loved the sales game. I loved doing consultative selling and doing value-based selling and all this really great stuff. I was the number one salesperson for 19 consecutive quarters. While I was there, I eventually made my way into sales management, ultimately marketing, and then I was hired over at Scorpion. So Scorpion was and is a digital marketing agency. When I joined in 2015, there was 6 person sales team, 100 person company, and 1,000 clients. When
Hmm.
I left Scorpion 6 years later, it had 100 person sales team, 1,000 employees, and 14,000 clients.
Wow.
So massive run up of clients and revenue and growth and all this amazing stuff. Let me tell you, I was not nearly this gray when I started. It was a lot of fun, a lot of highs and lows. Our sort of culture was all wrapped around this idea of work hard, play hard, and we had big goals and we did some pretty cool stuff. And so I left there at the end of 2021 and I had an option to go work at other agencies, go work in different places. And I decided that I really wanted to invest in myself. I had a calling, a voice inside of me that says it's time for you to really go back out as an entrepreneur. And I decided to become a consultant, work directly with agency founders, who, by the way, I love working with some of the most entrepreneurial, self aware folks that I've ever met. And now I work with agency founders to help them to escape what I call the generalist trap, which is where they reach a growth ceiling and are unable to really scale their business beyond a certain point. There's certainly an aspect of being stuck in founder led sales. Along the way, I wrote the book, as you mentioned, Anyone, Not Everyone. And it is a guide to help escape founder led sales and escape the generalist trap.
That's amazing, man. What a great story. I love, so some people are just like, you call it your calling or you call it what you're supposed born to do. And it looks
Yeah.
like from your story, sales and marketing is really what you were born to do.
Yeah. That's it. I love it. I love it so much. And I feel so fortunate that I get an opportunity to leverage some of my background to really help agency founders really get to that next level. It's a real treat.
And I just, before we move on to, I have a set of questions for you, but I want to ask you
Yeah.
this point that you made when you were at Scorpion. Sales went from 20 million to 150 million. Customers
Yeah.
grew from 100 to 1400. And
Yeah.
so what was that like, that period? Like, what was the biggest change? Because like when you see 10x, it's good to wish for 10x growth, but to witness
Yeah.
it right in front of you happening, how does a human
Yes.
being or people around you, the environment change when that kind of growth comes to you?
Yeah. We were definitely a different company at 100 people than we were at 1,000 people. When I joined in 2015, it was a very casual kind of environment. Everyone, like the founder and everyone down, I was going to say school, came to work in NFL jerseys. It was very casual, no HR department. We all got there, rolled in about 9 or 10, maybe hung over from the night before and would work till 9 or 10 at night. It was real casual. But for us to be able to produce those results, we had to find a way to put our clients first. And that was, in fact, a core part of the culture that already existed before I got there. I remember
Hmm.
when I was interviewing for the role, I almost didn't take the opportunity to interview there. I wasn't that interested. It was a digital marketing agency. They mostly focused on websites. And this was about the time when there were website platforms like Wix and these other platforms that were out there. I said to myself, why would I work for a web design company that does PPC? Why would I do that to my career? It doesn't sound like a good idea. It
Hmm.
wasn't until I ended up taking the interview. Remember, I was in the interview process, being interviewed, and I asked a question. Tell me about your, asked the person who was interviewing me, tell me about your client retention rate. And he said it's 93%.
Hmm.
And I almost didn't believe it because I was like, wait, you service attorneys. These are small local businesses and you retain 93% of these businesses. And what it turned out was that there was something that Scorpion at the time, it was called Scorpion Design, had done that created that outcome. It was two things. Number one is that they put the clients first. Clients were always the center of everything we did. So it was a culture of service, culture of client intimacy. And that's number one. Number two is that we've specialized in the vertical market. So we focused the entire business on working with attorneys who were at the time, and probably still to a certain degree, not very sophisticated when it came to marketing. They needed a partner who wouldn't just provide them with a bunch of PPC and SEO jargon and a bunch of leads, but someone who would take their hand and help them to understand what the internet is, what websites are, how SEO works from a high level, and most importantly, what are the things that they need to be doing in their business to grow in this new world. And so, as a result of this specialization, we understood what they needed to anticipate as business owners because we were doing it over and over again for the best law firms in the world or in the country, as well as the ones who were just starting out. As a result of all of that, the value that we provided them with, the customer intimacy and the understanding of their business, helping to coach them almost like a business coach, was so much more valuable than the $1,000 or whatever they paid us a month that it was very hard for them to leave us because they couldn't go anywhere else and get the same amount of
Hmm.
value for that price.
And I think you call this deep specialization in
That's
your
right.
coaching. But before we get
Yeah.
to that, let's bring it back to the agency owners now.
Yeah.
What's the number one sign that an agency is stuck in the generalist trap? What do you call the generalist trap?
Yeah. So after 15 years of experience being in the agency and now coaching dozens and dozens of agency founders, there are three telltale signs that agencies are stuck in the generalist trap. The first one is that they spend their days context switching. And what I mean by that, maybe one day you are dealing with a client and you're building a restaurant website. Maybe
Hmm.
the next day, you and your team are doing some SEO for a law firm. And maybe the next day, you're doing social media for a dental office. Of course, running a business like this makes it impossible to build deep expertise and repeatable processes, right? So when you're stuck in that, you're typically in the generalist trap. The next way that people get stuck is when you're winning deals based on price or on personal relationships. Okay.
Hmm.
If you're unable to articulate what makes you truly different from the alternatives beyond just, oh, we care a lot, or we're an extension of your team, right? All these things that everyone says. If you're unable to articulate that, you're probably in the generalist trap. And the third sort of telltale sign is, and this is probably the most painful, when you close a new deal as a founder, the team dreads the fact that they have to go out and they have to learn a whole new type of business. That's a whole big learning curve that they have to take on, and they resent that, right? They hate that because they haven't had enough time to learn about the last client you just brought in. It's exhausting and unsustainable. So basically, to kind of summarize this, it's three things. Number one, if you're living in context switching land. Number two, if you're selling based on price or you have team morale challenges as relates to growing your business, then you're probably stuck in that generalist trap.
Yeah, like we don't think about that, right? As owners, we think that every business deal that we bring in should have a positive, net positive impact on us.
We
But
should be celebrating. Yeah.
yeah, but like this thing is real. The new deal resentment that you just talked about, this is
Yeah.
crazy. People are gonna feel that. Yeah, I can hear you, man. It's
Yeah.
trying going from running that you're used to, you've been on 5, 6 day or running schedule, and now you're gonna have to go and lift weights. It's completely different for
That's
that
right.
particular niche that you're going into. So
Yeah.
amazing. So if you're stuck in those things, if you're closing deals based on price or personal relationships, if you're context switching every single day between different types of clients, or you're
Yeah.
doing your team has this resentment based on doesn't matter how amazing that new client is, they're going to have to go through that crazy learning curve. That
Correct.
means that you are stuck, my friend, in a
Yes.
generalist trap. So now the
Yes.
next question becomes, Corey, is so obviously looks like we want to go down and we want to niche down. But
Yeah.
what are some of the common pitfalls that agency
Yeah.
owners should avoid when niching down?
The biggest mistake is focusing exclusively on what I call surface metrics. Things like if you're looking at a bunch of different vertical markets, looking only at the number of businesses in the vertical markets as an example, or the average revenue, right? What people typically miss, and this is a big part of the book and what I call deep specialization, is really the emotional component of do you actually care about the people and the industry that you're going to be serving? You
Hmm.
actually have to give a damn, right? There's someone who is in seven figure agency. His name is Luke Egerbrotten. Not sure if you know him, but Luke is amazing. He's a great example of this. He built an agency focusing on construction businesses. Okay. And the construction industry is going through a big challenge, which is that, and this is something that Mike Rowe, the TV personality, he coined this concept. He said that the construction industry has a 5-2 problem. For every 5 people who leave the construction industry because they age out or they retire, only 2 people are coming in. So not only is there a greater and greater demand for construction jobs and services, but there have this widening gap of talent, like this massive gap. And so what Luke has done is brilliant. He not only creates amazing websites and does great SEO and PPC for his construction clients, but he has done something else that really demonstrates his empathy, which is he has started a foundation that raises money and awareness for jobs in the blue collar sector. So what he does
Nice.
is every year he raises all this money and he gives money to a high school student who instead of going to college goes into the trades. And they do this whole big event, this whole gala. They have this student come up with the big paper check and being able to, again, really raise the awareness of the viability of working in the trades. And that's just a beautiful example I love to share about really caring about the people in your industry and the requirement to do. So that's number one. You have to actually care. Number two is trying to focus on too many different vertical markets concurrently, right? So at Scorpion, when we grew from 20 million to 150 million, we didn't do that by focusing on a bunch of verticals. If you go to the website today, you can see that, yes, Scorpion focuses on attorneys, on home service businesses and franchise businesses and whatnot. But we didn't start there. We started with attorneys and we went deep into their world. We became specialists in their world, began to build a great reputation as deep specialists. And then only then did we build on the second vertical market, which was home services. And then we did franchise. So in other words, we built this multi-vertical agency through one vertical after the next, not all at the same time. And then I'd say the third challenge or the problem area that agency founders find themselves in when it comes to taking this sort of vertical approach or niching down is they struggle to say no to the $5,000 check. And the $5,000 check is the check from in the hand of the prospect they're trying to give to the founder, but it is a prospect that is not in the target vertical, right? It's very difficult for the founder to turn away that kind of money. And the reality is that you're never going to truly build deep expertise and build repeatable processes if you continue to say yes to these really distracting clients. I like the quote
Which
from
probably
Bruce
end
Lee.
up creating resentment within your team.
Exactly, it goes full circle, right? Yeah. And so I love the quote from Bruce Lee. He says, "I fear not the man who has practiced 1,000 kicks one time. I fear the man that has practiced one kick 1,000 times," right?
Love
And
it.
that's really the essence of how to make this thing work.
Amazing. Great insights. Care about the niche and focus on one niche instead of multiple ones.
Multiple. Yep.
And then learn to say no to stuff that's not inside. Commit to it, right?
Hard. It's hard because these founders, they get into business, they get successful and a certain level of success by saying yes to everyone. But eventually that starts working against them.
I love it. That's amazing. So here's my another question, and I want to base it around your book because I've read your book. It's very well written, and I love
Thank
the
you.
audio version as well. Is there a tip or trick for other agency owners who want to write their books or release their own
Yeah.
audiobooks? Is there an advantage to that? How would you say that they go about it?
So I'll answer the first question, which is there an advantage to writing a book? I am a huge fan of writing a book, especially if you are an agency founder or an owner who wants to establish credibility in a vertical market. There are few things as powerful and as credibility building, if you will, than publishing a book specifically targeting a vertical market. I'll give you a quick example. So for my book, interestingly, my big lesson was a reflection of the message in the book, which is all about the power of focus. When I started writing the book, I started writing it for a general audience, right? I'm writing about focus and I wrote it for a general audience of
Yeah.
businesses because everyone has this problem with focus. And it wasn't until I had to rewrite it specifically for the agency owner that everything came together. It all snapped for me. I had better examples. The writing was crisper. It was better. The advice I was giving. And that, as a result of all of that rewriting and all that focus, it has really become truly a bestseller. It has a big impact. People like yourself and many other really smart, successful people have read it and given me great feedback. And it's a really important part of now my sales channel. So that's number one. Definitely recommend doing it. And number two is, how do you do it? I think there's a number of different ways today to write books, and a lot of them are fine. I think you have to start with the end in mind. Like, what is the purpose of your book? When I started writing my book, I thought, I'm going to sell 10,000 copies. I'm going to be a New York Times bestseller. And actually, that wasn't the outcome that I wanted because that wasn't going to serve my purposes. I didn't want to become an author. I wanted to build my coaching practice. And so as a result of knowing what you want to do, that will help to determine what path you take. For example, I chose to self-publish because I want to do things like give away my audiobook. I want to be able to do what I want with the material in there versus having to work with a publisher. I also, a really important thing that I did is I chose to work, and I paid a lot of money. I chose to work with an editor, very high quality editor who had edited books that I respected, like other B2B books. I did that because I wanted to have something that's called a perennial bestseller. Have you heard of this concept of a perennial?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so there's a book called Think and Grow Rich. Have you heard of that book?
Yeah.
Or Robert Cialdini's book Influence. There are a couple of books that will remain in the bookshelf forever, right? They're written decades ago, maybe in some cases,
Yeah.
and they continue to be relevant.
Yeah.
I knew that I didn't have the skill and the background and the knowledge to be able to write such a book, but I knew that I wanted this book to really be a high quality representation of me, my work. And so I hired a great editor who helped take this very questionably good manuscript and turned it into something I'm extremely proud of. I love sending it out because I know I'm giving away great value. So those are some of the things that I did that make looking back made me look proud that I did those things.
I love it. So the formula is easy. First of all, I think it's a no-brainer. Every agency owner within, especially when you're
A
niche
hundred
focused,
percent.
figure it out. And then when you write it, work with some professionals so that other people can understand what we're talking about. But it's going to cost a little bit, but I think it's worth it at the end of the day.
The ROI is 10x or 100x or more, right?
Yeah.
It's very
While we're
powerful.
at it, Corey, you mentioned that there's a way to get your audiobook for free.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
Yeah. So for your listeners, I'd love to offer a free version of the book, Anyone, Not Everyone. You can go to anyonenoteveryone.com and you can get access to the audiobook. And when you do, you'll also get access to a digital workbook, a bunch of videos, templates, worksheets, everything that you need to work the actual process that I teach in the book. So you'll have all these great resources. All you need to do is go to anyonenoteveryone.com.
We'll throw that up on the screen and we'll put it in the description as well of the podcast.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks
you.
for that, Corey. Now, I want to
Sure.
quickly move into our rapid fire rounds and I want to
Sure.
hear your ideas on these very important questions going around. Number one
Let's go.
is AI in sales automation.
So I think AI is very powerful for doing some things in sales, but my experience, especially at Scorpion, where we had this massive impact and growth, it will never really substitute being able to build genuine trust and a relationship with your prospects and clients. That's not going to go away. What AI
Hmm.
is really good for in the sales context are things like doing market research, building lead lists, creating automated campaigns that make it much more
Hmm.
easy to execute on these things. But again, it will never substitute the relationship building that is required in effective selling.
Love it. Love it. Great answer.
Mhm.
Client retention. That's
Yes.
every agency owner's arch nemesis right there.
I have to lean back on my experience at Scorpion. What drove that 93% retention rate was client intimacy, customer intimacy, caring about them, as well as having a vertical expertise. Those two things, as well as having great communication, like one of the biggest ways that I've noticed why clients leave agencies is that just don't feel like they're getting good quality communication often enough. So caring about your clients, being a specialist in solving their problems, even the problems they don't even realize they have yet, and being a great communicator, that translates into client retention.
Love it. And here's the last one, and my favorite one, in office versus remote and or global teams.
So I think that I grew up in a world where everything was in office. And I will share that being on a sales team and being on a sales floor, like in physical proximity, there's something to that. There's a mojo that happens, there's an energy that happens. But I think there is something that can replace that, which is having a very strong company culture. If
Hmm.
you don't have a good company culture, you probably should be in person. But when you have a very strong company culture and very clear values that are not only shared but lived
Yeah.
through behavior, that's when you could really make a remote culture thrive.
Yeah, and I just asked, I told you I was in Dallas last week. I talked to Rob and
Yeah.
Alex, one of the co-founders of High Level, and I was asking them these questions around remote first agency and all of that stuff. And Robin mentioned something very interesting on that note that because they
Mm,
are a remote 1,500 employees and they're by
mm,
default remote first, so everyone works remotely. until they come together for main company events. And I'm like, how are you guys doing it? Because we have 250 employees and it's hard as it is, but these guys seem to be thriving in that remote first culture. And one thing that he shared was that, yeah, absolutely the culture part. But one thing that they do on their remote culture is that they have these breakout rooms for every team.
Mm.
It's going to be a live breakout room inside Zoom, for example. So you can go to the sales team and all the sales team will be there sitting in that room. They may not have their cameras on, but everybody's there all the time. Then you can go
Wow.
to the marketing team. It's just like knocking on office doors. And then everyone in that team is sitting inside that office. And they do it for
Amazing.
all 1,500 of their employees. So I was like, wow, man, that takes a lot of courage to do, but looks like it's working out for them.
That's such a creative solution because I think the
Because
challenge that you have as, yeah,
like you said,
go
right?
ahead.
Like you need that per sales floor vibe. And I worked at Best Buy, right, for 7 years. So
Yeah.
I know how
Okay.
the sales floor vibe, you
Yes.
have to be there,
Right.
right?
The electricity, the
Everyone
mojo. Right.
together. And you
Yeah.
lose that in the remote environment because
Yeah.
you're on your own and all of that stuff. But how they counter it is by having everyone in a live Zoom room throughout their work shift. They're going to be leaving for a client call or whatever. They'll put down, be
Yeah.
right back, client call, and then
Oh,
everyone is back in there again.
that's exciting. I love that idea. Really cool.
Corey, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. I'm hoping that I'll get to see you face to face this year sometime,
I would love
probably on
that.
one of the events that we both go to. And I really appreciate your time.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on, Azar. It was really fun.
Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon.